David here with Figboot on Pens. Each year around tax return time, I like to treat myself to a special pen purchase. 2 years ago I picked up the Danny Trio. In this past tax season I picked up two very limited edition Viscontis. One of which was the Opera Desert Springs, and then the other was the Opera Crystal Dark Age. And I'll show you the Opera Desert Springs at a later date, but today I wanted to take an in-depth look at the Opera Crystal Dark Age. What I'm going to do today is go over the parts and the features of the Visconti Opera Crystal Dark Age, talk about what I care for and what I don't care for. Then I'll show some measurements, some size comparisons, and then I'm going to demonstrate how Visconti's power filling system operates, and then provide a writing sample. The pen arrives in this box. Visconti has a number of boxes, and this is one of their nicer ones. I had purchased this pen from Chatterley Luxuries, and inside the box they included a nib-shaped bookmark with the Chatterley Luxuries logo on it, which is nice. And then there was also a nice handwritten note thanking me for my purchase. Inside, get this off, is one, I'll call it one of their hard boxes as opposed to the faux leather ones that have the tray on the side. On the top we have the Visconti logo, and it says the Writing Renaissance, and then Firenze, which is what Italians call the city of Florence. And then inside we have the pen, which I'll set aside here for just a second. The inside of the box is a nice soft faux leather, and the top is padded a bit. Under the tray, we have a couple of things. One is we have a standard Visconti marketing booklet, and then there is a special edition card. That I'm not 100% certain of the exact name of this pen. I've seen it listed on retail sites as the Opera Crystal Demonstrator Midnight Dark Age, or just Opera Crystal Dark Age, but the back of the card that it comes with calls the pen the Opera Crystal Demo Black. So who knows what it's really called, but that really doesn't matter, because in my opinion this is a very cool pen. So let's actually take a look at it. So here is the Opera Crystal Dark Age. Now I cleaned the pen out recently because I want to show you some of the inner workings. So there is a little bit of colored water in here. This pen is part of Visconti's Squaring the Circle collection. These pens aren't rounded and they're not faceted. They're kind of in between. It's made from a clear, high-quality acrylic that has a really nice feel to it. The pen feels solid and has a decent weight to it. All of the trim is black and ruthenium plated, even down to the piston rod inside the barrel. I think that's a nice detail that adds to the overall look of the pen. Even though most of the time you'll have this pen inked up, and so you really won't even get a good look at the rod. But let's start by taking a look at the finial. It's ruthenium plated, as I mentioned, as well as all the rest of the trim on the pen, and it says Visconti and made in Italy and has the Visconti logo. This model utilizes the Visconti My Pen system, where you can change out the finial for something like your initials or a gem or an astrological sign. But on this pen, I don't think it would look very good to do that. I believe the My Pen inserts only come in silver and maybe gold colors, but I feel that would clash a bit with the black trim on this pen. Then we have the traditional Visconti clip. It's shaped to represent the archways beneath the Ponte Vecchio Bridge in Florence. And again, it's black and has Visconti in black lettering with a white background, which I think looks rather sharp. The cap angles up slightly, and then we have the cap band. On the band, on one side it says Opera Crystal. I have to say, I'm not a really big fan of the font they use on the word crystal. I couldn't determine the exact font they use, but I think it's just a bit too whimsical for this pen. It's not Comic Sans, but it's Comic Sans' cousin. It's like they went to the Monteverde school of font design. Then on the other side of the band, it has the number of this limited edition. This one here is number 18 of 38, so this is a very limited edition. There's other versions of this pen that come with one of Visconti's rounded nibs. That version, I believe, was limited to 68 pieces and I think was only available in Hong Kong and Southeast Asia. There is a small step down to the barrel, which tapers down at an even angle until we get to the end of the barrel, which has a piston knob, which is used to activate the power filling system used in this pen. Like I said, I kind of cleaned it out so you can see the inner workings here. I'll ink it up during the writing sample and so we can see how the system operates. The cap utilizes Visconti's patented hook-safe locking system. In theory, this system prevents a cap from accidentally unscrewing. There's not traditional threads on the section, rather large grooves with a part at the end that serves to lock the cap in place. There's a spring located at the end of the cap here, and there's a transparent insert which provides a bit of pressure to help keep the cap's locking mechanism in place. So when you uncap the pen, it's not just a twist, it's more of a push than a twist. It's a little different compared to other pens, but it's very easy to get used to. Now, in my experience with Visconti pens, this system can be a bit hit and miss. On this pen, the section is metal and the system works perfect. But I have other Visconti pens where the grooves are machined into acrylic, and those have a much lower tolerance and some have a tendency to kind of snap open or uncap very easily. That isn't the case with the Opera Crystal, however. For the most part, if you just try to twist this cap, it won't come off unless you put some significant force behind it. If you really force it, then it will. But if you're uncapping a pen like you would normally do, it really won't budge unless you first push and then twist. With the cap removed, you could see this very nice 23 karat palladium Dream Touch nib. I really like the size of this nib. It's a number 6, which matches the size of the overall pen well. I like the design work stamped onto this nib, even though the dark color of the nib can make it difficult to see the detail at times. This is a medium nib and is marked with an M at the bottom there of the nib. And here's a look at the plastic feed. There's a Visconti V on the section, but I'm not quite sure why it's facing the other direction. While the V does visually match the pointed end of the nib, in order to see the V facing up, you would need to be looking at it upside down like this, with the nib facing down. Now, typically when anyone is looking at a feed, they're going to have it in this orientation, which would make the V upside down. So, on my made-up 1 to 5 aesthetic orientation level of annoyance scale, with 1 being a minor annoyance to 5 being, geez, I can't stand looking at this thing, I would rate this as a 1. It really doesn't bug me. I just have a mild curiosity as to why it was created that way. The section is flared at the end and then angles up to where we have the blocky threads, which aren't sharp or uncomfortable at all. There is an ink window here, which I'll show you more about later when I ink up the pen. And then there's an angled step up to the barrel. The section is metal, but with the ruthenium coating, I really don't find it to be slick at all. The pen is plenty long enough to use unposted. The cap does post securely, but the cap does bring with it a lot of weight, and it adds a considerable amount of length to the pen, and I feel that it backweights the pen and throws off the balance. So I prefer to use the Opera Crystal unposted. Now, I'm not certain what the initial retail price was for this pen. I am thinking that it was just under $1,000. With only 38 of these pens made, the availability was very limited, and I picked up this pen well after it was introduced. Back in March of 2017, I was able to pick this up from Chatterley Luxuries for significantly less than the introductory price. You will find that when it comes to Visconti pens, especially limited edition models like this, which aren't readily available through major retailers or multiple retailers, that the price can significantly change over time. A pen that was introduced for $1,000 could be available for half that price at a later point in time. But with that patience comes a risk. With only 38 of these produced, the chance of them being available for an extended period of time was very low. But sometimes you get lucky, and with this pen, I'm extremely happy that I picked this one up. Now, I currently have 20 Viscontis in my collection. Yes, I know, I need to cull that number down a bit. But out of that 20, this is my favorite. I think that the black trim on the clear demonstrator looks very sharp. And While I've experienced a number of quality controls issues with my more recent Visconti purchases, the Opera Crystal Dark Age here wrote fantastic out of the box, and I haven't experienced any issues whatsoever with this pen. So the combination of unique and striking looks as well as excellent performance makes this pen one that will be very difficult to leave off of any future top 10 lists. Oh, okay. So now it's time for some measurements. Then we're going to do some size comparisons, and then I'm going to show you how to ink this pen up and how the power filling system operates. And then I'll provide a writing sample. Okay, let's start by taking a closer look at this power filling mechanism and ink this thing up. Now, I mentioned it before, there's a little bit of inky water in here. While I clean the pen out, I didn't dismantle it, so there's just a little tinted water in there. It's nothing too bad. But you could really get a good look at Visconti's double reservoir power filling system. The rod inside the barrel, which makes contact with the ink, is made from titanium, so there won't be any issues with corrosion. What happens is when you unscrew the end, you can see how the little plunger here separates from the forward reservoir. And then when the pen is inked, the forward reservoir, and the forward reservoir has been depleted, that's what you would do in order to fill the pen back up again to let a little bit of air from the second, or a little bit of ink from the secondary chamber into the primary chamber. But we want to fill it back up. So what you do is you pull this thing all the way out. And then when you have the nib submerged in ink, you push the rod in, and the pressure builds up inside the barrel until it gets to about this point right here. When it gets to this point here, you'll hear an audible click and feel it as well. It's at that point when the vacuum that's created behind the seal, the piston here, is broken, and the ink will actually get sucked up inside the barrel. Now, here is a bottle of Visconti turquoise ink. I like the packaging that this comes in. It's just a cool packaging. And the bottles are functional as well. I like the looks of them. Now, I showed this in a review almost 2 years ago, but I've always been a big PC gamer. And a while back, I was playing BioShock Infinite when it came out, and I walked into a room and saw this sitting on a table. Someone at Irrational Games is a fan of Visconti. It looks exactly like a Visconti bottle, except the cap on the Visconti bottles are round, not faceted. But in video game programming, round is hard, straight lines are easy, so I can understand the logic behind the faceted cap. I just got a chuckle out of it when I saw it. Okay, let's go ahead and ink this up. We've gone ahead and we've pulled out the piston knob, and then what happens is you insert it into the ink and press this down until you feel the audible click, and there you go. It goes ahead and it fills up the chamber in there. Now, there are a couple of tricks if you want to get an uber full fill that involve kind of pushing some of the air out here, but this does have a decent ink capacity, and so I don't necessarily feel the need to do there. And then what you do is you just screw the end of the barrel down, and you are good to go after you wipe this off. So here we go with some size comparisons for the Visconti Crystal Dark Age. Here it is with a Lamy 2000 stainless steel. And then here it is with a Lamy VAX 700. And here it is with a Lamy All-Star. And then in regard to some other Visconti pens, here it is with a Homo sapiens Dark Age. Then here it is with a Divina Elegance. And then here it is with a Visconti Millionaire. So here we go with the writing sample for the Visconti Opera Crystal Dark Age. And this is a medium 23 karat palladium nib. And the ink we are using that you saw earlier was Visconti turquoise. This is what the ink looks like. That it's a decent ink. It's kind of similar, I think, to something very similar to Private Reserve Naples blue, which was one of the first blues that I really fell in love with. And then here it is with the Pilot Iroshizuku Konpeki. It isn't quite as dark as that and doesn't have as much sheen, but the Visconti turquoise is still a solid blue. So here we go with the rest of the writing sample. This is a very heavy medium line. You can get a decent amount of line variation out of here with just a little bit of pressure. That it is a rather wet and generous medium nib. As you can see here, the wetness is pretty decent on here. And then in regard to reverse writing, it's a little bit on the scratchy side, but still lays down more of an extra fine line. And then in regard to some fast writing, it works just fine. So there we have the Visconti Opera Crystal Dark Age. I really enjoyed this pen. It feels very solid in the hand. It just really feels like a quality writing instrument. And on top of that, I just really love the looks of the pen as well, with the black trim and the clear acrylic. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.